Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Today, another look at Vulture's 2024 comedians you should know and will know. I did part one last Sunday in the September 8th episode, so I'll pick up where I left off last time. If you're just diving in, every year Vulture puts out a list of comedians you should know, and they tend to bat about, I don't know, I'll roughly call it 50% on these, so it's a pretty good list. Regardless, it's a good way to uncover some names that you might not know. I had shared the list in the Facebook group, probably 2 weeks ago at this point, Daily Comedy News Podcast group. And some of the more active members in the group commented that they didn't recognize most of the names. I got to say, I think I recognized, when I first went through this, maybe 6 or 7 or so. So this is a great job by Vulture. Let's start with Youngmi Mayer. She's got a memoir coming out called I'm Laughing Because I'm Crying. She describes her appeal as that fact that I'm a failure and effing nuts and also constantly bring it up. Vulture says she's a whirling dervish of off-the-cuff neuroses, a relatable queen on TikTok, and a blunt and brash storyteller on the page. She's a master at taking would-be cliches. For example, a front-facing comedy video in which she adopts a Korean accent to imitate a Korean uncle, for example, and elevating them into intergenerational character studies through sheer specificity. When Korean uncle takes long cigarette drags while staring into the distance, he's not just getting a nicotine fix, he's remembering the IMF crisis. Then Vulture has Dropouts, Breakouts, Vic Michaelis, Brennan Lee Mulligan, and Rekha Shankar. They were all streaming on something called Dropout, which spun out of College Humor. Vulture tells us Brennan Lee Mulligan, the most recognizable of the streamer's stars, has become a phenomenon in the online tabletop gaming community thanks to the popularity of his show Dimension 20, in which he plays tabletop role-playing games with a rotating series of guest players. As the show's energetic host and game master, he builds whimsical worlds for participants to play in and breathes life into them with an array of silly voices. Vic Michaelis, known for their chaotic appearances on Game Changer, the premise of which changes every episode, hence its name. Vic serves as the host of Very Important People, a talk show in which Michaelis interviews comedians who are transformed into characters by makeup artists. And Rekha Shankar made the jump from being a sketch writer and performer at College Humor to utility player at Dropout. She's competed on Game Changer, created the Chef's Table parody Gods of Food, and hosted the show's Celebrity Slumber Party and Erotic Clubhouse. Kathy Peruso is part of the clown community in Los Angeles. Clowning is a comedy subgenre in which performers commit to over-the-top character work marked by boorish physicality and purposely exaggerated stupidity. Courtney Peruso got her start at the Groundlings, and then it felt creatively lost when she left that behind in 2012 until LA clown Natalie Palamides, who's amazing. And listen to Natalie's episode on Gianmarco Cerezi's podcast. Very, very funny. Highly recommended. Natalie introduced Courtney to the art of clowning in 2016. Peruso spends years developing clown shows, fleshing out the characters she plays and the worlds they inhabit to probe deeper questions. We are deep here. Is anybody still doing stand-up? Chloe Radcliffe. Vulture says one of the lines Chloe Radcliffe often uses during a set. That wasn't a dig at comedians, just it's really hard for me to explain like a theater show as opposed to just telling you a couple one-liners from a stand-up. Chloe Radcliffe, one of the lines Chloe uses during sets is a fast jab, design, explain, and then quickly dispense with the fact that she's a birthmark on her face. Chloe says, for those that don't know, it's a birthmark. That's what it is. It doesn't lower my self-esteem enough for me to have sex with you. She says it in a different way. Someone might express that sentiment. Vulture says it's a natural way to do the yes, I'm aware of what I look like joke that most comedians need to do in some form or another. Radcliffe says her comedy style developed out of her nerdy high school and college career as a speech and debate competitor. She talks about the insecurities and miscommunications that drive her relationships, about her own flaws as a partner, and about how hard it is for straight women to have satisfying sex lives. In one set, she realizes a group of guys in the front row were Swedish, and she goes into a digression about a Swedish guy she once dated who didn't take his condom off for an hour and a half. She finds herself chanting in her mind, reduce, reuse, recycle. Veronica Slowakowska is on TikTok. She leapfrogs from one idea to the next. She'll improvise a song about friends or invent an intense, too-committed, fantastical excuse for why her roommate can't use the bathroom after her. She has some comedy shorts in which she plays a version of herself with no sense of social awareness, a randomly incredible singing voice, and a deep and abiding crush on her roommate Kyle, played by her podcast co-host Kyle Chase. She elevates cringe comedy to high art. Next up, fans of Daily Comedy News Podcast know this guy, Gianmarco Cerezi. Check out the September 7th interview where I did just about an hour with Gianmarco. His TikTok has 700,000 followers. Vulture says he has poster's disease. In the best possible sense, he's constantly developing new material, and he's relentless about getting it out into the world. He's got a joke about Mr. Beast and says it's kind of pathetic filming strangers to build up your YouTube following. Then his moment drops in a moment of self-awareness. The crowd laughs because they get it. Next up on Vulture's list of comedians you should know, Emil Joachim. Vulture writes, some comedians talk about politics with a sense of gravitas. The humor has an edge of anger. The point of the joke is to clarify injustice. Emil Joachim's comedy is often political and is often about injustice. But his political focus has an unusually gleeful tone to it, a bro-y pleasure that often lends on a note of happiness or at least a sense of excitement that he's gotten away with something fun. Vulture then shared a naughty joke about Greta Thunberg. I don't even know a way to clean up this particular joke, but like I said, I shared the article in the Facebook group, Daily Comedy News Podcast group. Eagle Wit is a trickster. He creates tension in his jokes by slithering around the different, often contradictory sides of an argument, and he has a gift for living in pockets of uncertainty. He remembers being infuriated when one of his white friends called Bob Dylan the greatest lyricist of all time, and he says until he actually listened to a Dylan song, posing to the audience, you ever lose an argument so hard you become a fan? He then reads some Bob Dylan lyrics to the audience and says, isn't that beautiful? And then says, yeah, that's Jay-Z, F Bob Dylan. He has a joke about Kanye being president, the joke being he's the black president white America deserves. That sets up a story about a time a heckler believed he was making that argument for real. He told the heckler, it's a joke. I'd never vote for Kanye West. He's my favorite rapper. I trust him with beats, not the button. And I have a question for you, dear listener. You ever been recording your podcast and you're just scrolling down a list of comedians and you go to the next one and you find out on the fly you had reached the end of the list without reading it? Has that ever happened to you? That happened to somebody recently and they didn't know what else to do other than to say, that's your comedy news for today. See you tomorrow.